Hi, my name's Liz Wallace and welcome to Meals on Wheels Food Safety Training Courses, and this is course number 1, which is an introduction. Now, why is food safety so very important? Why do we put so much emphasis on food safety? Well, food safety involves safeguarding food from hazards, and a hazard is anything in the food that could cause harm to the health of a consumer. For example, it could make them ill or even worse. Now, the people who will eventually consume the food that we handle for Meals on Wheels are sensitive consumers or people at risk. Now, these sensitive or people at risk that Meals on Wheels serve are usually elderly, or they're ill and convalescing, or they may have a weakened immune system. And these people have much less resistance to any of the hazards that they could eat in food than you or I do. So when we're completing any of the handling tasks for any of these sensitive consumers for their food, then we need to minimise the hazards to make sure that the food is safe for them to eat. Now, Meals on Wheels have procedures in place to make sure that the food that's served to any of these people at risk, the sensitive consumers, is safe for them to eat, and it's also a nutritious meal for them. Now, bear in mind that food handlers are also people who transport the food. It's not just the people who are preparing, but people who transport the food as well. So we all have to be careful that the food that's given to these people is protected and that the Meals on Wheels procedures are followed. Now, there are national food safety standards that are in place, and these are laws for food safety, and Meals on Wheels follow these laws. Now, in general, the laws or the food safety code states that all food handlers need to complete some sort of food safety training, and that food safety training needs to be commensurate with the responsibilities or the things that they do, the tasks that they complete. All food handlers also in any organisation or in any business need to control food safety issues while it's to produce safe food while that food is under their control. The other thing is that all companies and organisations need to implement food safety systems to make sure that all of the food hazards are recognised and the procedures and controls are put in place to make sure that these hazards are minimised. Now, Meals on Wheels comply with all of these areas, and that's why there are all of the procedures in place for everything that you do. Now, the illnesses. The illnesses from food poisoning are due to pathogenic bacteria. These are harmful bacteria. Pathogenic is harmful bacteria. Not all bacteria are harmful. Also viruses, parasites, chemicals, metals and moulds. When any of these things are in food and that food is consumed, it can cause illness or it can be worse, and especially worse if it's one of these people at risk, our elderly, ill and convalescing, or our people with a weakened immune system. It can be a lot worse for them. Now, there's 2 types of illnesses. The first one is called food poisoning, and the second one is called a foodborne disease. Now, the first one, food poisoning. Food poisoning usually starts fairly soon after eating contaminated food, and it's usually as a result of a large amount of bacteria that's contaminated that food. It usually lasts for about 24 to 48 hours, but it can continue for a week or more. And people who are at risk, people who are sensitive consumers, it can be a lot worse for them. So this is one of the reasons for keeping their food safe. The other one, a foodborne disease. Now, foodborne disease is normally a result of a small amount of bacteria, pathogenic or harmful bacteria, that's on that food, which when it's eaten, those bacteria lodge in the gut and they start to multiply. Once they multiply to large enough numbers, then the body suddenly realises that there's a problem and this person suddenly starts to feel ill. But by the time that bacteria has multiplied to these large numbers, it's also started attacking the major organs. It attacks the kidneys and the liver and all of that sort of thing. So anything that's any illness that's resulting from a foodborne disease normally is very severe, and it can last a long time. It can last the rest of someone's life, or it can kill. Especially one of these people, our sensitive consumers. So Meals on Wheels have procedures in place to make sure that these people are kept safe from food poisoning and from foodborne diseases. Food poisoning affects loads and loads of people. In fact, in Australia, there's more than 19,000 reported cases each day in Australia of food poisoning. That's about 7 million people a year. These are actual reported cases. These are cases where someone was so crook they had to go to the doctor. They didn't just feel a little bit ill one night and get up in the next morning and they're fine. These are people who are so ill, and often it's these people here. These people are so ill they have to go to the doctor, and sometimes they will end up in hospital as well. So once the doctors receive these reported cases of food poisoning, and they've looked at it and they say that it is something to do with food poisoning, then they report it to the health authorities, and that's where these stats come from. That's where these numbers come from. Now in Australia, there's around 120 deaths each year from people who become ill from food poisoning or foodborne disease. In the UK, for instance, there's around 400, and in the US there's even more because of their larger population. But in Australia, 120 deaths. It's just terrible. Now, food poisoning and food safety is not something to just brush off, because it can be life-threatening. People can and people do die, and often it's these people, the people at risk, the sensitive consumers, who do die from food poisoning. Now, the Meals on Wheels have procedures in place for you to follow to make sure that you comply with the food safety laws and to make sure that these sensitive consumers are protected. This is to make sure that the food that they eat is nutritious and it will not make them ill or even worse. So if you're a food handler in any capacity, please take care of the food while it's under your control. And you must be a food handler because you're doing this course, and thank you for doing that. Please take care of the food while it's under your control and follow all of the Meals on Wheels procedures that are in place. If you've got any questions at all about any of the procedures, you're not sure why you need to do something, or you're not sure what to do, then please talk to your coordinator or your contact with Meals on Wheels. Get them to explain it to you, because it's vital that you do know why and you do know how to do things. Thank you so much for helping Meals on Wheels, and thank you for listening today.